What happens when large commercial banks lend money to foreign countries, and then those foreign countries aren't able to pay those banks?
Well, we have an example of exactly what happens with the country of Greece. The large banks in large syndicates across the world loaned the Greek government over decades, an enormous amount of money. And the Greek government was unable to repay that. And what happened is that the banks withdrew their support, and it threw Greece into food riots. It completely destroyed their economy. They had 70% unemployment. I mean, this is the kind of thing where the banks, as I said, they pick winners and losers, not just with companies that they support, but with countries that they support. And then they came back, and then they offered Greece a bailout. They said, we will, again, it's a loan. I mean, they just destroyed them through the process of giving them loans. So they come back around and offered them exactly the same poison, again, as a short-term stopgap measure. And they said, we'll loan you $1 trillion to help you get out of this mess. You can pay us the money that you owe us, as well as have enough money to kickstart your economy again, get it back rolling. Oh, but there's a couple of other things. We're going to take half of your pension funds. We're just going to physically just take it. And we're going to take 600 of your islands. And this is what Goldman Sachs did. So now the executives of Goldman Sachs, they all have their own private islands. So you ask me what happens? Well, that's exactly what happens.
And that's at the expense of the Greek people.
Yes. The Greek people are now in absolute debt slavery. The government has taken this bait, this $1 trillion that's been dangled in front of them, and they've taken that in order to try and recover this failed economy. But it was more of a failed system rather than a failed economy. It was a central bank, private banks, loaning governments their own money with interest, and it collapsed. It happened in Argentina, it happened in Iceland, it's about to happen in many countries all across the world, which are technically bankrupt, but are simply just running on fumes, waiting for the banks to move in, make their kill, and then put them on their knees. And then once they're on their knees, come back in and offer them the exact same poison that put them there in the first place. It is, as I said, it's unsustainable, it's unconscionable, in our case, unconstitutional. I mean, we have many, many battles to fight with the Fed on many different levels, and we can win them all.
Well, when our government makes policies that are disastrous, like promising everybody to have a home when people can't pay for that home, who picks up the tab?
Well, it is passed on, quote, to the American people in these huge bailouts. We've seen, the stimulus is a form of bailout. We saw bailout to the banks under TARP, and there are more coming. We're not going to be able to stop this appetite for the privatization of profit, but the socialization of the debt. And that's exactly what you're seeing. When these transactions work to the benefit of the banks, they take them in the form of profit. But when there's losses, they pass them on to the public. And this is, again, it is insane that we put ourselves into this position of being subservient to this private cartel that reaps these immense profits. I mean, into the trillions of dollars in profits that they're able to do by playing this game of one currency versus another, one country versus another, creating wars. I mean, how better to cause a country to go into a massive amount of debt than to put them into a situation where they have to go to war. And then they have to buy, obviously, tanks and bazookas and missiles aren't something that the average person needs. They only need to conduct a war. And so when you conduct a war, the country goes into greater and greater debt as it must pay the military-industrial establishment to create these weapons. They buys these weapons and it uses these weapons. And they're not recyclable. A bomb isn't something you can recycle. It's not like a car you can take and crush it up and use the metal over and over again. Once that bomb blows up, it's done. So it is a perfect system of forcing governments to incur increasing amounts of debt far above what they would have to do to just have a normal social economic system. And the wars that we're fighting now are in countries far overseas that many argue don't even have any place in American foreign policy. And I think that, again, the banks are the ones that are reaping all of the profits. We've spent $1 trillion in Iraq. Well, we borrowed that money in order to do that. Who benefited? The banks.
Well, the average person looks at our debt, and everybody knows we have trillions of dollars in debt, but we're still cruising along. Nothing's really happening to our economy that is disastrous. You know, we're having some foreclosure, but who has more debt than us? And where does it stop?
I think that's a great question. Where it must stop is with Sue the Fed and our efforts in court to stop them. Because if we don't stop them, I don't know what there is to stop them until we become like Greece, until our economy just simply implodes under the weight of its own debt and the spending, the massive spending that we're doing. And the Fed, as you mentioned earlier, monetizing our debt, simply printing more and more and more money and flooding their economy with this fiat money, this currency that's backed by nothing. We're going to end up like the Weimar Republic, needing wheelbarrows to carry around mounds of cash to buy a loaf of bread.
So that actually could happen. We could start printing $1,000 bills and $10,000 bills and $100,000 bills as hyperinflation becomes a reality in this country. That's possible?
Of course, there's nothing to stop that process. Congress has demonstrated that it is unwilling to step in and take its rightful role in demanding that these things stop, and demanding and taking control of fiscal policy and monetary policy, of simply nationalizing the Federal Reserve and taking over its functions as was required under the powers of Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. It said Congress shall. It didn't say could or would or should. It said Congress shall. This is one of the things that Congress is supposed to do. Our Treasury is supposed to be printing its own money for nothing, not borrowing its own money from private banks paying interest. It's ridiculous.
How can the average person actively stop this?
I think the most important thing always is education. I think that the Fed has been very careful about withholding this information. Even students who are, PhDs in finance and the money system, this is information that they don't have readily at their disposal. It's not that it doesn't exist. It's simply that they don't publish it. They don't talk about it. It's not out in the open. It's there for anyone to see. It's an open secret. So the education component needs to happen, and everyone needs to get educated. Individuals, Congress, businesses, everyone needs to be involved. As I said before, this is not a Republican-Democrat issue. It's not divisive. The economy involves all of us. And what Patriot Storm wants to do is have everyone recognize that we are all in this together. That the economy, if it collapses, will collapse on every one of us equally. It will destroy us. It will destroy the middle class. It will take the middle class down in an impoverished level that they never imagined that they'd have to live in. The wealthy will continue to remain wealthy. And who does this hurt most? The people who can afford it least. The current poor. They literally will be like Zimbabwe. They will be living on dirt streets in cardboard boxes because that's all that will be left for them. Because there won't be any money for entitlements. We won't have money for Social Security or welfare or any of the other things that have become part of the American culture. Part of this expectation of I don't have to do anything. I can be dependent upon the government to take care of me, to give me everything that I could possibly want. And that's simply unsustainable. Because as Margaret Thatcher said, the only problem with socialism is pretty soon you run out of other people's money. And that's exactly what's happening right now. Because we have, in this great country, we still have this creeping socialism, these policies that have been introduced over the last 50, 60 years. And they are now taking their toll. It's catching up with us. There's always a delay. But the delay isn't delayed anymore. We are in this crisis. We're looking at it. You mentioned that people may not be aware. I don't know if that's true. I think if you go and talk to the average person and say, do you know anyone that's been affected by this economy? anyone who's lost their job, lost their homes, lost their will to live. There's all kinds of things going on right now, and people, I think most people will say, yeah, I do know someone in that situation. I think it is affecting more people than we know.